Today's video will be related to troubleshooting vacuum problems with your HVAC system or climate control system. So as you guys can see, I've made a trip to a junkyard and I got some spare parts. I got the whole set of the vacuum pods or vacuum actuators. I've taken apart and I got this mechanism of an old car, and of course the problem was the same. It was missing the spring and the fresh flap actuator was also leaking, and what it seems like always tends to leak this one, the front one. So I had my old one, that was the old one that I had. So I've taken it apart and I pulled the rubber membrane out of it, and I combined two of them and I made one good one. So I have a spare one, and the one in my car sitting there, that's one I bought about 4 years ago. I bought it new from the store. So like I said, I got my spare parts. I also found the spring that I've modified and I've installed it in the mechanism over here. Also, I got some parts, so I got a manifold, I got a full set of vacuum hoses, so hopefully I won't need them, but the reason I got them was for this. There's a bunch of little seals inside that if this thing leaks, you need to replace them. So my plan today is to pressure test all the vacuum actuators in the climate control system. Second, I want to replace these drain tubes. I put some hoses, but I managed to get this original drain tubes, so I'll be replacing those. Also, as I've mentioned, fogging. I finally found out what the problem for what was, and apparently this flap doesn't move as it should. I replaced this vacuum actuator a while ago, but I haven't looked far enough to realize that I'm missing some parts here. And the part that I'm missing, as you can see, there's a spring there. So that spring broke, and as I've been investigating this problem, turns out that that's a fairly common problem on W202 model. So what do you need to understand, or what do you need to know about the climate control system and all those flaps that control the airflow? So there are 6 actuators. 3 of them have a single line coming in. So 1, 2, 3, and later I'll have a look what do they work on what airflow. Now there's 3 that have double, or say 2 lines coming in. Okay. Next, 5 of them, this one, this, and that, they all have a spring inside. So, which means when you apply vacuum, the pod pulls in the link. So they all work. Spring, let's say default is extended position, and when you apply vacuum, it retracts. Same with the double ones. So you see, this is extended position. As you apply vacuum, it pulls back, but it's spring return. Same with this one. The only one that doesn't have an internal spring is this actuator, and this is the one that sits on the fresh air intake flap. So contrary to somewhat belief that some people say because you have 8 lines on a manifold, and I'll show you lines. So the perception is that one line is to retract the pod or retract this actuating link, and the other line will extend. Well, it's not. It's wrong, absolutely. So when the system applies vacuum, it always retracts the link. So now let's go look at the manifold. So now you see the manifold, and let's count. So we have 6 pods, and we have 3 and 6, and we have 9 connections. Now here you can only count 8. So looking at that, you're gonna see that in a schematic 2 pods are being fed from the same vacuum line. So let's look at the vacuum test of all the pods. Now obviously starting from the beginning, so from the first one, and looking at the 2 lines that run from the first and the second line, and I have number 1 is green and number 2 is dark red, and these 2 lines run to the fresh air intake flap actuator. Now testing this actuator, you want to connect both lines at the same time. The reason for having 2 lines, and because this actuator has a longer stroke, and just having one bellow does not accomplish that. So in order to achieve this longer stroke, Mercedes has this kind of a 2 bellows running in series, and that's providing that longer stroke. Now if you're going to connect just one line, say you're going to connect the green line, that will still work because they will pull in and it will stop in the back cover here. But if you're going to connect the red line, you're going to try and vacuum, as I've done when I was trying to figure out how the thing works, you're going to get a vacuum leak, because this line will draw vacuum from this side and also will draw vacuum from this side, and air will pass through the seal on this rubber bellow. So to properly test the actuators that have 2 lines, you need to connect both lines, period. Here I want to explain why do you get a so-called false vacuum leak while you're testing if you only apply vacuum to this line. So I've taken apart this actuator, and you can see that when you have it assembled, it kind of creates 2 chambers. One chamber is here between these 2 rubber membranes, and one chamber is on this side, because there's the connection and this is the membrane. So now if we start vacuuming from this connection, obviously that is going to pull this rubber membrane in. Let me take this thing apart further so you can have a better understanding. So I just moved away the 2 covers, the front one and the back cover. And now when I mentioned that there's 2 kind of chambers in series, that's what I mean. If you look at that, that moves, and you can remove it. If you swing it, you can disconnect it. So this is disconnected. Now I want to remove this membrane from this housing. Okay, so now let's have a closer look. Let me just put it like this. So let's have a closer look at this membrane. And as you can see, you can observe that this membrane is not a solid piece. Right in the middle over here, there's an opening that fits around this white piece. And now imagine when you're creating vacuum on this side, obviously this piece over here, it actually tries to shrink, and it actually creates a seal. So, and that seal is enough on a vacuum. Even the engine might get like 22-25 inches of vacuum. So that is enough to keep this sealed. Now, contrary, if you would try like this and create a vacuum in between the two membranes, so what's going to happen? That would be equal as if you would create pressure on this side. Now, if you create pressure on this side, nothing is holding this membrane over here, and it will tend to expand and push itself out like this, and the air will seep through this opening. And this is what I meant when I was saying that there could be a false vacuum leak if you only test pods that have two connections, just connecting the port that's, I call it in the middle, or the front port. So I hope you guys understand that, because that confused me a little bit until I actually have taken this all apart and try to understand what causes that vacuum leak. And that's what I'm saying. When you're testing the vacuum on the pods or on the vacuum actuators that have two lines, you need to connect both lines, or just connect the back line, and then you're gonna get correct reading. So looking at that, 10 inches, and it's been sitting there for a while, so that kind of confirms. And I can't figure out why I don't get the focus, but anyway, so it's been sitting there for a while, probably a minute or two, and I have 10 inches of vacuum, and so that kind of confirms that it's fine. So let's look at the schematic. You can see the first two lines run to the fresh recirculated air flap actuator. Don't look at the colors because they're not quite bright. So next one, looking line number 3, and it comes down to center outlet diverter flap actuator. So it's this one, and it only has one, says dark green light with a white stripe. So let's look at that. And looking here, we're finding this is the dark green line with a white strap, and following it, I want to follow where it goes. So it goes up and it comes down. Okay, and you see it's right there. So this is the flap, as they call it, center outlet diverter flap, and this is the line that runs to it. So let's connect our vacuum pump. Alright, so I got my vacuum pump connected, and since we looked at the schematic and it's only one line running to this actuator, so we just connected one connector and I'm gonna start pumping. And you can see that it's not pumping. It's actually leaking somewhere. So that might be a problem. Let's troubleshoot this. So to troubleshoot, I thought I should disconnect this green line from the pod and connect my vacuum line or vacuum pump right here and test this pod separately, just to verify where the leak is. Is it in a seal of a connector or is it inside the pod? Okay, so I've connected my line right to the pod. It's behind over there, and you can see this is the line disconnected. And now let's start pumping. And you can see it goes to about, no, keeps draining. So that's kind of confirms that the leak is inside the vacuum actuator, and it's most likely the membrane has a rupture in it. So I have to pull it out and replace with the one I got from a junkyard. Okay, so in order to remove that pod, first we need to reach over here with a flat screwdriver and disconnect the link carefully. Okay, and then see if I can have some light like that. Now we can just slide. There's a little retainer there, but it should be okay. Just push on it and this thing should slide out. And now just need to work it somehow. How do you pull it out? And because it gets jammed in there. So let me see. The other option is to disconnect this link, and then it's going to be a little bit easier to work with. So as you see over here, we can disconnect the link over here. So I'll try to do that. Well, maybe on a second try. Now I want to get this one out somehow, but it's preventing, and I think this link is preventing me from. So to do that, to make it easier, I'm gonna have to pull this pod out. First I need to unhook this arm. And it's really hard doing it with one hand. So see if I can put the camera like so. If you can see, and I'm gonna try to unhook this arm. Okay. And now just reach with a screwdriver put it here and slide this pod up and put it to the side. So I'm just gonna put it over here for now. And now this is free. Now I should be a little bit easy to remove it. So this box is kind of in the way. So I finally got it out, and in order to do that, in order to pull, the one we were trying to pull is the center outlet diverter flap actuator. This is the second one closest to the engine that sits over here. In order to remove this one, first you need to pull the one that sits further from the engine over here, and that's called right center outlet tempering flap actuator. So removing it is pretty, same way. Disconnect the connector that brings the vacuum, or disconnect the vacuum line, and then you push it back to here, and then you kind of swing it this way in this area, or in this space, and you're going to be able to pull it out. The centering outlet diverter flap over here, so you push it back and you do the same way, you bring it out into here. So right now you can see it, I have it in my hand and I'm going to try testing it. Alright, so I connected my vacuum pump. Let's place it like so and start pumping. And yeah, clearly it's not working, it's not keeping vacuum. So looking in my parts bin, that's the actuator I need, and I pressurized it. Oh, sorry, I applied vacuum. So this is keeping vacuum, so this is the one I'm gonna have to use there. Alright, so now let's try and slide this thing in. No, sorry guys, but that's how you do it, but I'm gonna have to use two hands, so sorry, I just can't show it to you. Okay, so I got the center outlet diverter flap actuator, sorry, yeah, that's the one. I got it in. It's actually went in much easier than pulling it out. So it's in. Now just need to remember to connect this piece over here. Careful so we don't break anything. Oops. Okay, so all I need to do is just connect this link to this little arm. Alright, so I've reconnected the lines to the actuator, and I've connected my vacuum pump to the end of the line here, and I'm looking at my vacuum. So the vacuum is good and it's holding vacuum for a while, so I think that was the problem. Now I'm just gonna look at this. This is probably a rupture. Well, we can deal with that later. Alright, so we've done the third line. Oh, I've done the third line. So next we're moving to line number 4, and it says it's a red light with a blue stripe, and it's running to these two pods. One is left center outlet tempering flap actuator, and one is the right center outlet tempering flap actuator. That's actually the one that I've pulled from here. So I'm gonna test it first, and then if it's no problem, I'm gonna install it back, and then I'm gonna test it again. Just basically testing both of them to see if there's any vacuum leaks there. So this is the right center outlet tempering flap actuator, and I applied the vacuum. I have about 12 inches. I don't see any problems, so this actuator is gonna go back where it came from, and then I'm gonna test the whole lines together. Alright, so installation of this pod should be a breathe. Similar idea. Put it in. Alright, now just need to make sure it's engaged properly. And just kind of slide it in. Make sure I didn't pinch any lines. Okay, that's how it's supposed to sit. That will go up. Alright, so now all I need to do is just push it in to click. It's all in. Next, just need to reconnect my arms. So I'm gonna put something under just to support the arm, because it's plastic, as I push this metal arm on it, and then I'm just gonna reconnect the line on the bottom. Alright, so I got this actuator installed. The line, I've connected all the lines back, and I've connected my vacuum pump to the line number 4, and now I'm gonna apply some vacuum and see how that feels. Kind of goes slowly, but because there's two pods, I guess there's two actuators, so I've got about, that's about 12, and it seems it's holding. I'm gonna leave it for a minute or two and come back and see how it feels. So now let's look, while this is holding vacuum, what's the next one. So next one is gonna be the footwell flap actuator, and we have two lines running down there. Nope. Okay, so looking at this lines, it says dark red and green is this line, and then this line is not indicated. So let's look, but the numbers are 7 and 8. So looking at number 7 and 8, so I have number 8 is a dark red and green stripe, and then number 7 is green and red stripe. So 7, and is indicated that, well, mine runs opposite, but anyway, let's look. So number 8 should run to the front, and number 8 runs to the front, so that's correct, except the color is backwards. Okay, and then number 7 runs to the back, and it's number 7 runs to the back, and it's green. Okay, so either this description is not correct or something, but the schematic is correct, it's just the description of the line is opposite. Okay, not a big deal. What we need to do is, so I need to push these lines out. Careful so we don't break. You see, I already broke one over here. So I'm gonna push the lines out, and this line 7 and 8 I'm gonna connect my vacuum pump, and I'm gonna test for vacuum. So I've connected the 2 lines over here. Now I'm gonna try and apply some vacuum. And it's not holding vacuum. So back to the same task. Need to figure out, pull the lines off, see if those are the lines leaking, or if there's a problem with the pod itself. So let's go do that. Alright, so I hooked up 2 vacuum lines to the both ports. Okay, now I'm just gonna apply some vacuum and see what the problem is. And here's the vacuum, and apparently there's no problem. So the pod or the actuator is working as it should. There's no vacuum leak there. So most likely it's leaking around the seal. So the seals or around the connector. So we're gonna have to have a look at that. Right, this is holding vacuum as it should. So I'd say this is okay. Okay, so I've reconnected my vacuum pump to the 2 lines here, and now I'm gonna plug with my fingers the 2 lines like so, and I'm gonna apply some vacuum, and I'm gonna have to do it without the camera because I don't have third hand, and then I'll turn the camera on again. Alright, so I applied vacuum, and you can see I have about 18 inches and the lines are not leaking, so which means the connection between this little adapter and the plastic line is fine. So the problem must be somewhere in a connection of the adapter to the pod. And how do we test this? Well, let's see. Alright, so thinking logically, if we have both these lines connected to a vacuum and we have a vacuum leak, so I need to eliminate one of the lines, and I know that if I'm gonna apply vacuum to the red line that's closer or kind of on this side, just because from testing the other actuator this was leaking, so I want to apply vacuum to the furthest from the link that has a cap on the side. So that would be the green line. So I've disconnected the red line and I've just applied vacuum to the green line, and I've applied about 10 inches. So this side is holding vacuum, which means that the line that's leaking, it would be the red line, this one. So I could probably just replace it because it won't be a big deal replacing this line, or maybe I'll try and replace the seal. So let's explore my options. So I think in this case the easiest is to replace the whole line, because all you need, or all I need, is just click it or unhook it like this. All right, and pull it out, and that's the line. Now I don't really see anything wrong with the seal there, but I'm gonna go get another line and put it in. Alright, so I got the line replaced. I connected it to the actuator. I plugged my vacuum pump, and I just connected it to the line that I've just replaced, and I'm gonna vacuum it, but again, not more than 10 inches, which is 300 millibar as Mercedes manual says. Alright, so there is a little bit of a leak, but again, that might be because it's connected just with a single line. Because right now I don't see any vacuum leak. Anyway, let's disconnect and connect both lines and repeat the test. Okay, so I've connected both lines to the vacuum pump, and now I'm gonna try and get some vacuum going on. So that seems like it's working okay. Yep, so I guess the problem was in that little seal that was connected to the pod. Alright, so let's look next. We've done this. Is defroster flap, and it's connected. There's two lines and running to number 5 and 6. Okay, and that's the one that I removed, that sits right here. So that's the pod, and this is a defroster flap. Alright, so I'm gonna connect my vacuum lines and I'm gonna test this actuator. Okay, so connected my vacuum pump. There's the actuator sitting on top, and let's try to see both of them at the same time. So I'm gonna apply. So let's leave it for a minute or two, then come back and see if it's holding vacuum. Now I need to drain this. Now I need to figure out how to install a spring onto the fresh or recirculated air flap. Now, to get to these connections, what you need to do, you need to pull this plate off the manifold. So to do that, you go on this side and you spread this two catches. See, there's a little hook, so you spread them and slowly you pry this plate off. Using a screwdriver, you just get under and slowly you separate and you lift the plate off, and it comes off like this. Careful when you're gonna slide this connectors off. There's a little round spaces, so careful when you do that. Just do one by one, because you just push it off, because it clicks in, and these little things, they tend to break, so be very careful. So that's the pile of parts that I've taken off so far. Okay, I've tested all the lines again. Everything's to be in order. So next, you want to take your ends and slide them into the plate. And I'll show on my spare manifold how to install it. And then you take this plate and you install the plate into the manifold, and you firmly press all these connections to the manifold, and you make sure that the cover clicks in and it sits in place. Then you want to arrange all your hoses, because by being out of space they moved around, so you want to kind of organize them so they follow nicely, like so. Like I said, this is the ends, these are the ends of the lines. So what you want to do, you want to slide it in, and you'll see there's a little groove here. So you want to slide it in, and without forcing, make sure it lines up, and then give it a little pressure. And it's better to use two hands, because you might break this little piece. So you can give it a little twist, and then it kind of goes in easier. So you put this in, then you take your manifold, you take the plate, and it goes in like so, and then you drop it down, and you press all these connections into place. Make sure it's the end sits in like so, and you press them all into place, and you make sure that this side clicks in, and that's assembled.